on the computer here. So, and we can just kind of get started. So, Andrea, appreciate you joining us. It looks like we have Cliff and Austin and Mark here, and we'll probably have a few other people joining us. But if you want, just start, just kind of tell us a little bit about your background, and then we'll probably have some questions for you as we go.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for inviting me. My background is primarily software engineering. So I've studied software engineering. Focus on complex adaptive system from a software perspective. And then I started moving toward social system because the complexity is definitely higher there. And I started working more with people than with software. I still love writing software. Is for me more of a kind of relaxing activity nowadays. I don't have much things which go in production. I just do it for fun, or I do things which help our company work better. So like extension to Google application workspace and things like that, which help us all work better. But other than that, my main focus in the past 5, 6, 7 years probably has been developing organic agility together with other thought leaders in the complexity and leadership space, and focus primarily on leadership coaching, culture shift, and organizational design.
So
in a nutshell.
Quite an array of experience you have.
Yeah, I've been moving left and right, and thankfully, because our economical situation allowed me to keep on picking the things I like the most, I had the luck to also have the time to dedicate to my passion. So,
yeah.
So far, so good.
Yep. Well, Cliff, Austin, Mark, feel free to chime in and share, what questions you have or what you're struggling with.
So I'm not shy. I'll go ahead and jump in if nobody has anything. So for us in our Agile journey, the current state that we're at is so I'll make this really brief. So we've tried to condense our release cycles to get them faster and faster, but our quality we didn't have the foundation there for the quality to keep up with that. So we've had to move back to a quarterly cadence for release of our product, which is probably the right move until we get our QA. So that's a whole nother topic. But what I wanted to pose to you guys is I'm having a hard time convincing the teams of the value of having let's say a done increment at the end of the sprint. And the argument is that if we're not going to release for 3 months, what value does it give me to have a done, working, potentially shippable increment at the end of the sprint?
I guess is a new problem. Nobody has seen that before. Well, I don't know. Should I go, guys, or how does it work? So everybody tries to answer the question. Well, I think there's two aspects here. So first of all, how often should we release is not a question that should be answered with your capability to do so, but rather with what the market demand is, because releasing more often than what the market need is waste anyway. Just to give you an example, many years ago, I was one of the coaches who helped Ericsson Telecommunication becoming a bit more agile as an organization. And we managed to go from 18 months release cycle to a point where after 7 years, the whole organization was able to release a complete mobile soft switch solution, which means the software that keeps up a mobile network with MMS and all additional services every 3 months. The client, the telecoms, hated them because they would take the software release and test it in their own simulated network for roughly 3 months before they would put that in general availability and consider upgrading. And now what they had to do in the past was to actually do that every 3 months, which is unjustified effort for the value they would get out of it. So for me, the first aspect is understanding what is the market need in that moment in time. And eventually, if you see that the market need is in conflict with what the organization is trying to achieve, then find out a different business model or find a way to exploit the business model. For example, what Ericsson tried to do is to actually lease the mobile network as a key in end as a service, so they would have the control over all the software lifecycle and could update all of the existing network, which of course returned also in terms of investment on the fact that instead of having 20 plus different versions in production, they always had maximum 2 or 3. So this reduced enormously the maintenance cost, even without having to release so often, even if they could. But what they decided to do is to try to do that anyway internally. And I connect now to the second part of your question, because by doing that internally, there was the possibility to inspect and adapt more often and to eventually correct the direction in which the feature was going. And additionally to that, they could invite to some review meeting some of their lead customer, which were having the chance to give feedback and steer the feature development in the right direction. And for them, this was very valuable and important. But also another business model emerged, which was, we could, guys, give you this feature in exclusive for the next 3 months or 6 months if you pay a premium price, and we only give it to the other guys after that period. So basically, they already built it. It was already shippable, but not officially shipped. But only if a client wanted to have it, you could pay it for extra money. So they always looked at the thing not just from what we can do, but also how can we leverage that to the market advantage and monetize on it. Because if the two things don't go hand in hand, then I agree with your team member, what's the point in releasing software every sprint if we don't get valuable feedback, and if it doesn't help us hacking our business model as much as improving our software platform. Does that make sense?
It does. So as a counterpoint, so some of the patterns that I'm finding that I'm having a hard time communicating is that quite often we finish we finish the sprint and we are able to demonstrate something, but there's still leftover work to be done. And it is demonstratable, it's just not, that feature is not officially done to be releasable. So at the end of the 3-month cycle, you have all these little things. I don't have all my unit tests built yet. We had to sacrifice some of that. We have some UI debt that maybe we didn't fully flesh out. A whole host of a number of things that are just small little cruft that you need to polish up before being ready to release. And I'm trying to push the teams to be at the point of you've got the installation packages built, everything. You don't have this work at the end of the release cycle that needs to be done before it's ready to be released. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's definitely.
And we're trying to utilize the definition of done and trying to build that up. But anyway, just looking for your suggestions.
Yeah, I was saying that's definitely a kind of a mind shift there, right? Because it seems like that these folks are used to doing waterfall. Now you're doing agile, and they're just not grasping all of the things that need to be done. Which also could be that it could be at the feature level, it could be at the story level. You might need to decompose both of those in order to make things smaller so that they're more consumable, so that they do see that. I think that, and it sounds like your QA is separate from your development instead of it being all together. Is it all together? Okay, but so are you? are you creating T-shaped people there? Do you understand the T-shape, okay, or pie shape or E shape or whatever shape you want to do? But like I'm struggling with that as far as the team that I'm working with right now, because they've always been I-shaped people, and they're just like, well, why should I test? I'm a developer. I'm like, why shouldn't you test? You should be, you know. And I'm trying to get them to write the test before they actually code, you know, TDD.
I'm sure you've never heard, well, this person can do it 4 times faster than I can, so why would I need to learn this now? We're holding back the team. So exactly what you're saying, Austin.
Short-term pain, long-term gain, right? So that's what most of these guys don't get. That you know, they think that just being, you know, well, like in a depth of knowledge is where it's at these days, and it's not. We need, you know, we need that breadth of knowledge across too. So have you ever proposed feature flags to them?
We have, and so we do have feature flags in place, and I was holding out thinking that would, but now it's just more of, well, it's behind a feature flag, so we really don't need to finish that right now.
Yeah, I think that's a typical anti-pattern that emerge. As opposed to trying to do continuous integration, the feature flag is always an excuse to say, okay, I can write code, but it's not getting integrated, but you're actually postponing the problem, right? So the value of having at the end of every sprint something finished, which fulfills the definition of done, is that you are limiting the risk iteratively and incrementally. So rather than making a lot of decision at the beginning and then crossing the finger that by the end of your release cycle, everything will be sorted, you're actually making few decisions with few assumptions every sprint. And your goal is to validate those decisions and assumptions by the end of the sprint, so that you are reducing the risk significantly rather than postponing it. And the feature flag is one of those typical, if you want, tricks that very large organizations like Microsoft or other used because they weren't able to switch to continuous integration. And I agree with what Austin said. At the end is ultimately a mindset problem. I mean, if people are not owning and feeling responsible for the work they do, and they cannot agree on a common level of quality, that is the journey you have to go through. And there is no shortcut to it, unfortunately. And the journey means that they have to find a way in which they all agree that good quality is like this. And this is the bar we all want to achieve. And this is because we believe is the right thing to do. And the other element that could help them is to involve in the review meeting some external stakeholder from time to time, perhaps even customer, because believe me, there is nothing more effective for a team member when they get direct feedback from the people who actually use their software, because in that moment, they all of a sudden realize that what they do is important because there are emotion attached to it, there is value attached to it, and it changes their behavior significantly. As long as the developer only want to write backend code or front-end code, and that guy is gonna write the test anyway faster than me, why should I do that? They are still thinking about their job in terms of function rather than in terms of being part of a team, of a whole, and through collaboration and synergy, being responsible to deliver value. And that is a massive mindset. From switching from being responsible for doing my task in the estimated time towards switching in being shared, in a responsibility shared with other people to deliver value. So that's a different level, right? And that's a very important step to make, and is a cultural shift also. But only happens if you get feedback from the outside, if you go continuously and reinforcing the fact that you don't really care who does what, and it's not about efficiency in the short term. But there is a concept probably that explains this quite easily, which is called liquidity. Are you familiar with that? With team liquidity? So liquidity basically is how fluid can be the flow of work that your team goes through. And it basically starts by making a competency mapping of what your team skills and capabilities are. And every time there is a task, you always make sure that the person with the most specific set of skill and competencies available pulls that task. Not the one who could do everything, but you keep the people who can do more and are more flexible as mentor to the one who needs to learn, because in case something unexpected happens, you have them free to jump on the hard task on the fly. And in this way, everybody learns to write unit tests, everybody learns to make design, and they don't have to be all God and expert, but they have to know that job good enough so that they can work independently. Because every time they need help from someone else, you introduce dependency within the team and between team potentially. And this creates, of course, waterfall behavior, because you daisy chain the task with one another, and the poor tester only has the 1.5 day left before the sprint is over, and they can never do a good job. And the job of the tester is not to fix problem, is to find them. And so inevitably you end the sprint with leftover, with not really done stuff, and all this type of things. So ultimately it's all about, on a daily basis, really being able to go through all of the functions and make sure that you have a stable state, and you reduce the risk over time, so that when you reach the end of the sprint, you exactly know what works and what doesn't. And probably the team didn't even start doing something that they already knew couldn't be finished by the end of the sprint, because it would be waste. Because ultimately carrying on undone work between one sprint and the next results in reduced agility of the team, because you are carrying on technical debt. And if the product owner wants to change decision for next sprint, your team goes, oh, wait a minute, we can't, because we first need to fix those half-done things that we left inside before we can go in another direction. And that's the biggest problem. Does that make sense?
He's absolutely correct. Yeah, I agree with all of that. So,
That's awesome.
The other question I would ask is, does the team know their why they're working on this, and why they're doing the work, and what is the value they're delivering, and how it's being measured by management? I mean, I know those things are not typically, but it is what it is, guys. You know, management wants to know how we're doing on things. They want to know the metrics. They want to know the OKR. They want to know all those things. So, what is there any of that? Is there any dashboards or anything you're using to show that sometimes, like I just showed a team a velocity chart from Jira, and they were like, "Oh wow, we suck," and I'm like, I didn't have to tell you anything. All I did was show you a graph, and so and that actually helped them, and it kicked off the thing. Well, how can we get better? How can we do things differently? Because they want to accomplish, they want to complete sprints. They're just not there yet, and it's for them. It's all about the feature planning and story sizes. They are trying to do everything, perfectly, which is also an anti-pattern, right?
So yeah, we the two teams that I serve, we have dashboards, and Tom, we'll have to schedule this for another time. I've got some very interesting takeaways from some of the observations from the team on the dashboards, and how we've had to tweak the metrics that they use, because the teams didn't think some of them worked well for their team. But I'll leave that for another time. This is very helpful. I just want to add, if you guys see me looking away and typing, I'm not following up on emails or Slack messages. I'm taking notes. I'm just a digital note taker. So don't think that I'm not fully engaged. I am.
I do the same thing. That way I can keep track of them. Because if I put them on a piece of paper, they'll get thrown away eventually. So.
But yeah, thank y'all a lot. That was very helpful.
Good.
Cliff, Austin, what questions do you guys have?
What about sprint length? Do you have any strong feelings about that, or any experience varying the sprint length?
Sure. I mean, usually the sprint length is determined by the team and what they feel they need to get, something accomplished. And I have several teams at Fiserv, that some that are 2 weeks and some that are 4 weeks. We've got one group now that's doing daily sprints. They're coming in during the morning. They're figuring out what they're going to do, almost kind of like a scrum bond kind of a thing. But they're coming in, they're figuring out what they're going to do. they're having a demo by 2 o'clock that afternoon, and by 4 o'clock it's being pushed to production.
Hmm.
So we have the extreme variance of all of those things. It really just, what is the team comfortable with? What's going to give them, you know, you want to push them a little bit, right? But you don't want them to feel like that they're always under the gun. Are they trying to get you to do more than 4-week sprints, or?
Well, no, we just do 2 weeks, but I, wanted to investigate varying it and what factors play into that. And it sounds like you said it's entirely up to the Scrum team.
Yes and no. I mean, my view is that the length of a sprint also is determining at which frequency the customer/market would receive added value. And connecting to the question Mark had before, the shorter I make the sprint, the more often I can inspect and adapt on that value. But if that is extremely more often than the market would require, first of all, I have to have very, very good capabilities in my team to end up having a really shippable increment at the end of every sprint, which is what the Scrum Guide requires, by the way. So one way you can turn it around, I always say very pragmatically, it should be as short as possible, but as long as necessary. Because ending a sprint without an increment, which is shippable, is pointless. That is not a sprint. So I'd rather have a bit longer sprint, but always releasing something which is really shippable, and I have no carrying on work, and I have no technical debt store in the closet, rather than forcing a shorter sprint and ending it with half-done stuff, because that is creating long-term much more problem. What I should invest on, of course, continuously, is to make sure that my team improves the practices and is reaching some way in sometimes in the future the capability to shorten that sprint. That is what I can do as a coach, as a Scrum Master, because as an inherent value. And the value is the following. Let's say you are a stakeholder and you go to your team or you go to your product owner and you tell him, hey, I totally want to have this feature, it's super important, the market is pulling it right now. And he goes like, great, I just had the planning meeting yesterday and my sprint is 3 weeks. So it means you have to wait the first 3 weeks until this sprint is finished. Then I'm going to present the feature to the team next sprint, and we'll take another 3 weeks to get it out, assuming they can do it in one sprint. So you wait 6 weeks from the moment you have a request, 6 weeks minus 1 day, until the team actually release that. And that is the acceptable business risk that you have to sign off if you say we accept sprint of 3 weeks. Because if the business stakeholder wants to have things released more often than that, then 3 weeks is not going to work, because the result will be that the queue at the product owner side, means the backlog, will grow indefinitely, and the stakeholder will get nervous because they will always get the answer, okay, thank you, I put it in the backlog. But that backlog will grow so fast that they already see, okay, if I put something in the backlog now, I'm going to see it in 6 months. So I'm not going to wait that time. I'm going to try to disrupt the system, especially if these people are people who sell before building, which many do. They will put an enormous amount of pressure on the product owner and on the system, because the amount of time they have to wait to get something done will not be acceptable for them. So you also have to look at what is the type of pull/pressure you get from the market side in order to determine what is a reasonable length for the sprint.
Well, you also, I mean, if it's on the market side, you also have to look at it if you're the product owner and say, is this feasible? Can we get this out in the time frame that you're looking for?
Yeah.
And if it's not, then you're going to have to say, no, we can't do it right now. And that's just the hard truth, right?
Yeah.
Or you have the option of canceling the current sprint, right?
So that's what I was going with. You could say, hey, this is great, we'll do this feature, but what are we taking out? You don't have to cancel the current sprint, but what are we taking out of that current sprint to fit this in? And can we fit that in the time frame that you're looking for, right? So
that's a very risky bet most of the time and produces a lot of waste.
It does. but you also have to set that expectation. You can't expect us to do everything that you're wanting us to do prior to this new thing that came in, and this new thing.
What I was suggesting is more in the direction of, if that happens often, it means that you are not working well in preparing the sprints, or that you choose a sprint lens which is way out of the market dynamics you are dealing with. So if you're working in online massive multi-line, so online multiplayer games online, and you have iPhone apps, you need to release every 2 weeks period. If you don't do, you are going down in the ranking immediately. So you need to organize yourself to either make sprint of 2 weeks, which would be the optimal solution, or to do like other companies do, which do stacked sprint. So one team takes 4 weeks, but they release this week. Another team takes another 4 weeks, but release next week, and so on. So you have basically stacked release. The effect is that the audience feels like you're releasing every week, which is true, they get new feature, but the lead time to get a feature is still 8 weeks, right? But the effect on the market is that you are putting out stuff every week, which is a kind of placebo, but is not really solving the problem.
So Cliff, I'll just add a little bit of a different outlook on this. So one of the things that problems that our teams had is their eyes were bigger than their stomach. And I've been pushing sprint goals for the teams. And the teams would argue that, well, this is just a small little thing that we're going to add in. It really isn't going to affect what we can really get done. So what I've challenged the teams to do is say, okay, if it's really that small, instead of focusing on 2 different things in a 2-week sprint, let's just have 2 1-week sprints. The first week you focus on A, the second week you focus on feature B. And in my experiments, or our experiments that we've done, the team was very optimistic. And so the 2, I think maybe 3 experiments we've done, feature A was not finished in the first sprint, the first week, and it carried over to take the full 2 weeks of the sprint. So that was an experiment for us, just to try to stay focused and to let the developers, the entire team, to realistically look at what they could get done and not look at everything so optimistically.
All right, I know Andrea needs to leave here in a little bit, so I think we'll just kind of thank Andrea and appreciate everyone for their time. I will definitely post this and share it, and we have a few other things. I know this is Thanksgiving here in the States, so we won't have much going on the latter part of the week, but we do have some things coming up next week. So appreciate everyone's time, and thanks, Andrea, for joining us today.
Cheers.
Yeah,
Sorry,
thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thanks.
Sorry that I only had 30 minutes today, but I'm really back to back since 8 a.m. and I'm a little bit squished at the moment.
Totally understand.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks.
Cheers, everyone.